Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. Today, we got a special guest on the program. We've got Aaron Broughton from Foothills Fabrication and F2 Performance Supplies. You might know the name or have seen the car. Aaron Broughton had one of the first cars that kind of hit the scene in the early 2000s, and it was the diamond green oval that had tons of detail to it. If you listen to the podcast, you've heard a lot of people reference Aaron's car as far as cars that inspired him to get things going. And it's kind of the car that we talk about that kicked off the whole super detail into things. I'd like to welcome Aaron to the podcast. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going, Bill?
Good, man. Good. So I've been wanting to get you on here for a little while, and just to kind of get our listeners up to snuff. You've got a lot of history that we're going to dig into, kind of where you started, where you're at, and probably one of the most popular things you're known from the VW scene was your diamond green oval that you debuted. I think it was 2003.
I think it was 04.
04. Yeah.
Probably the same at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, I looked at one of the magazines, and when there was a small snapshot of you on the cover from the 2003 Classic that published. Oh, yeah. That's a pretty awesome car. We're going to get into that car in a little bit, but kind of the way we start the podcast here is we first kind of dig into how you got into VWs in the beginning. So what's your VW story and how'd you get into it?
That's a good question. I got, a buddy of mine I went to elementary school with, and his stepdad was big into Volkswagen stuff, the dune buggy stuff. This is early 80s. Me and this guy have been friends since like 5th grade, and they were in the Volkswagen stuff. Then when we got into high school, he ended up buying a 66 Beetle, and they started working on it, and I was into cars, but I didn't have anything I was totally locked into yet. I always liked 67 to 72 Chevy trucks, even from when I was about 13 or so. And but at the time it was like, you're scraping money together and just figuring regular stuff out, and playing with toys and RC cars and crap like that. You know what I mean? And but once we started getting into the real stuff, it was like, I looked at the trucks and I was like, man, they're kind of pricey even back then, for a young kid to get into. And so I kind of went the Volkswagen route, and then just once you get into that, you're kind of you once you're bit, you're into it for life. So I want to say I had probably a few different cars, nothing spectacular before that car. And then when I actually got the 57, I was driving it to college for a couple minutes at least, and then till I ended up taking it apart and started doing the transformation.
So getting into VWs. Is there any car that you remember, like before you were coming up, that was in the magazine and stuff? Any cars in particular that stood out to you that kind of inspired you for Volkswagens?
It's kind of funny. I remember a lot of the DKP cars, the iconic ones. Bill Schwimmer's car, and then it was funny too. I remember not too long before I became friends with him, I remember Ryan Reed's car coming out, in Hot VWs, and it was like, oh man, he's in Corona too, and I'd seen that car around, obviously.
Yeah.
And, through that we connected, and we've been friends for 20 plus years or how long it's been.
So both you guys are based out of Corona. You got into fabrication. That's your shop now, Foothill Fabrication, F2 Performance Supply, where you do a bunch of sales and fabrication and parts that you sell and stuff like that.
Right.
Which we'll get into in a little while, but. Before that, how did you end up getting into fabrication and automotive, fabrication and design and stuff like that?
In the beginning, when I got out of high school, it was like, I was hungry to learn different stuff and wasn't really sure what direction I was headed. At one point, I wanted to paint cars, and I took a bunch of classes at the local, community college. And, when I was there was a teacher was pretty, kind of like a guy from the old days, and he would teach people how to do metal finishing and a little bit of lead work and stuff like that, and kind of the right way to do stuff. And so I was fortunate enough to get to experience that with him. But as time went on, I realized, man, I hate sanding. So I kind of morphed the other direction, and an old friend had taken me by a local shop. The guy did like a lot of, he was kind of an old street racer type, not old guy, but he was a street racer type guy. And I went by there and I saw the TIG welds on everything, and just super clean work. And I was just kind of like, I knew as soon as I saw the work, I was like, this is what I want to be doing. This is the direction I'm going to go. And I kind of became obsessed with learning how to weld and and from there it just turns into everything else down the line. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
And out of wanting to be creative, and at the same time, it was, you're looking at like, hey, there's guys going and having these, crazy expensive cars built. It's like, well, obviously at a, 17, 18, 19 years old, it's like that's not on my radar, but I want to learn how to do it myself. Plus I was, you want to make your own stuff, and,
Right.
So anyways, I worked at a company in Temecula, and they happened to have a TIG welder, and it actually, a few of us Volkswagen guys worked there, and it was actually through Ryan Reed's brother. It got us all, jobs there at one point. But so I kind of worked it out where I'd go on to, we'd have a break in the morning, and a half-hour break in the morning, and then our hour lunch. Well, I started eating lunch in the morning, and I'd go on the welder at lunch and just practice every day until I kind of picked it up. So that was kind of the start of the welding part, From there, it kind of obviously grew to this,
And so now take me back to when you built the car. So when you built the diamond green car, now that was 57.
Yeah.
So 57 oval. I mean, it was one of the cars that it was one of the first ones that started coming out that had all the button head Allens and all that kind of stuff, and really a lot of the little detail stuff. Where'd you get a lot of that inspiration from? Where you saw those little tiny details that you saw?
I'd been around some of it, and then when I became friends with Ryan, he'd been around more stuff than I had through his brother, and I learned a lot of stuff through just being friends with him. But in that point, we were working in Temecula area. We would stop by this hot rod shop, guy Fat Jack, on the way home from work sometimes and check out his stuff. And he would do real crazy, a lot of hand built stuff, and the washers, the anodized washers, and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of picked up a lot of that from there. And then some stuff from the race car shop, some stuff from Fat Jack's, and and then eventually I went to SoCal Speed Shop and worked there for a number of years and learned a lot there. And I've kind of been, luckily I got to learn a lot of different stuff from different places and kind of morph it all together to what I liked,
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. It's interesting because when you look at the diamond green car, a lot of it was kind of a resto custom, like a resto mod type thing, but it was done really in a way that kind of we're coming out of that evolution of billet starting to fade out, the billet dash inserts and the little billet pieces here and there and the deck lid standoffs and all these things. And then, you kind of bring that car out, and that car really sets a benchmark when it comes out. I think part of it was the color, a lot of people hadn't really started playing with the factory colors yet. Right. And so and then the seat upholstery, the seats upholstered real nice and tight and thin, instead of like the typical, you take it to a upholstery shop and they completely overstuff the seats and look like big giant biscuits in the car and stuff. When that car comes out, are you surprised the attention that car is getting?
Kind of, and I'm not really like an attention type person, I'm kind of more low key. And I remember the first time we brought it out, we went to I think it was actually 03, thinking back on it now. We went to the DKP Cruise Night was the first place I ever took it, and I got it. We drove in, it was like all these eyes were on us. I was just like, oh, this is weird, I didn't, it was kind of like strange for me. And then I figured it would get, a little bit of attention, but I never really thought that much about it, just kind of my art piece, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But,
so you're getting a lot of attention with that car. Now, when you debuted it, obviously you debuted it Classic Weekend?
Yeah.
And then brought it to the DKP meet, because since the early 2000s, I was going, or late 90s, I was going to the DKP meet because that was always the thing you did. Friday night, you go to the DKP meet, kind of check that out, see what's going on. And then usually the real the stunning cars that'll be at the show on Sunday, they're all there kind of in the reserved parking spaces right there at Nick's Superburger. So did you get parked up there where the debut cars were?
Yeah, we kind of pulled in, and, it was actually me and Ryan were cruising together. He had the beige rag top. We came in there, and we kind of parked up in the front there, and it was kind of like, okay, now everyone's got something to check out for this round of the deal, and for me it's like, all right, and then everybody wants to come and talk to you and ask you 5,000 questions, and it's like, okay, I need to catch a breath here, but it was cool, it was a different experience.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild. Like your head starts spinning because all of a sudden people are just peppering you from all sides, asking you all kinds of questions. Right. I remember seeing that car, man, and I was just like, holy crap, man, this thing is just sick. Like, it was just the way it was, the stance, the wheels. the interior, everything that was done on that car. Now, what do you think now, looking back? I mean, you're talking what's that, 15 years ago, right? That's 15 years ago.
Probably, what, longer, right?
Yeah,
15,
16
16
years.
years ago. I don't know.
So, and now you look at the scene now, because now you haven't had a car for you that you've come out with in a while.
And just lowered it and kind of spruced it up. It was kind of a project, but we didn't take it that far. And then a little bit later, he had that car, the gray car, the Zwitter, and
Yeah.
He bought the car. I think it came out of Belgium or something, and I don't know if someone back east ended up with it. And I think as it went down the line, it had a bunch of parts robbed off of it. 5-speed transmission was taken out of it, stuff like that. So he ended up doing another 5-speed for it. But he was obsessed with having the Porsche engine in it. And I was kind of like, at the point at that time, I was like, well, I mean, there's some neat things about it, but I don't think it's a necessary thing. He kind of thought it was going to be a deal where it's like, oh, the car's going to be running so much smoother and better with the Porsche engine. But it's like, it's old technology, but hey, whatever. If that makes you happy, it's cool. So he had the engine and transmission put in it at a shop down closer to him. He's kind of from San Diego area. And, well, he was having a few issues with it, noises and different things. And the car came up to us and, it had a bunch of different issues, and the interior wasn't that nice in it, and a bunch of just a bunch of little stuff. He decided he wanted to rewire it, so it kind of turned into a upholstery wiring. Pulled the engine out. That ended up getting rebuilt, and some more correct early parts put on it to make it look a little different and better. Things like that. It wasn't like a real crazy deal. We even having the wheels painted and polished, and he kind of picked out the tires for it, which wasn't my top choice in sizes, but kind of just what he was wanting for something he wanted daily drive. So we got involved with that as far as Volkswagens go, I guess, jumping around here. So
yeah, it's okay.
As far as Volkswagens go, we've got a car in the shop right now. We'll get to that later, but as far as building a complete car for anybody, we really haven't got too much. We'll kind of do bits and pieces on the Volkswagen stuff, and they usually go, and we've done some stuff for Buddy. Collaborated on like little parts and things, and then in fact when I met him was I'd heard about him but never had met him, didn't know what he looked like, and I seen he had a pan on a trailer at Wolfsburg West one day, and that's kind of how I first got intro to him. And then he was like, hey, I got this car we need to fix some wiring on, so he brought it over, and it was ended up being that rolling blackout car, which that's a whole different story. But
nightmare rolling. I mean, that car had to be a crazy car. Did you do the wiring on that car?
Yeah,
man.
So me and Scott here did the wiring, and and that's we'll get into that. But so the Zwitter, we brought that in, did that, built like a custom gauge panel for the dash. Just he went outfit with some Porsche stuff. We lowered the seats because he's a really tall guy, and did a bunch of stuff to accommodate him, but try to give it a little different flavor. Something different than the normal deal. But that car had a really, really nice interior in it. I mean, nicer than any Volkswagen I've owned or pretty much seen out there. But cool car, and I think it just actually sold maybe about 6 months ago to a guy, I think in Orange County somewhere out here. So it might
did he sell
eventually.
it?
Yeah,
man. It's funny. I saw that car. I was cruising through your Facebook page and on your Instagram, and I was just kind of looking for pics because my brother and I were talking about that car, and I'm like, yeah, I got to find that car. And then I found that car, and I said, was that car ever featured in a magazine?
I don't think it ever was, because I had talked to Stefan, and I probably won't say his last name right, but everyone knows Stefan.
Right,
Stefan,
right.
But at the time he was busy, and I don't think he was able to do it. And then he tried to hook up with the owner, and with him living down there, it was hard for me to orchestrate it, So anyways, I don't think it ever ended up going in the magazine, and I don't who knows what, kind of one of
Yeah.
those things that's kind of.
Well, and that's what's crazy, because that car is a super nice car. I mean, if you really, what I liked about the car, and I think what a lot of people can appreciate about resto custom cars like that, the detail that's put in, because you might take for granted, like, oh, look at the door panels, cool, and then you stop and look at the door panels, and you're like, oh, cool, it's got a opening pocket, and it's got some little trick stuff done to it here and there with the seats lowered and all that stuff, where when it looks all proportioned and correct, but it's all been customized, that's when it really is something really cool that you got to kind of take a step back and look at all the
Right.
detail, like the cloth wrapped wiring. I know.
Yeah.
Is that kind of your specialty in regards to cars? Like, what you really like to do is like some of the wiring and electrical on those cars, or because if you did rolling blackout is like craziness when it comes to the wiring under the dash of that car. Like, it's completely.
Yeah, that one hurt our brains a little.
Yeah, that thing is completely.
There's so much stuff on that car. It's like NASA type stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, because I know that it's got the roll cage, but the roll cage has solenoids in it that lock when you turn the ignition on, or when you lock the car, or what's the deal?
You could probably do an entire episode on just the stuff on that car. Well, it'll get sidetracked bad if we get down that rabbit hole. But
no. Hey, look, we're here to chop it up and just talk about whatever.
Right.
But I mean, that car, when I remember seeing the wiring paneling underneath that car, and I thought, holy crap, dude! Like, someone did some serious wiring, and that car's got, which you don't see in Volkswagen, it's got relays and all kinds of, electronic switches, and then the engraved panels and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's just nuts, man. The wiring, the intensity of the wiring. Like, what are some of the trick stuff that car has from an electronic standpoint that you don't even see on the surface?
Yeah, so I'll try and give the rundown as best as I can. Jimmy Larson built the car, and then as it goes, the owner, any new little trick thing that seems like it's a little better than the last one, it was like it keeps getting switched out before the thing ever gets done. So it's like
right,
kind of a tough deal, because sometimes when you're doing these things, you kind of got to like get a game plan and stick with it, because if you keep changing it, it's hard to go backwards on certain stuff, and then afterthoughts, so it's tough to like plan out that stuff when it's already been done and redoing. But the car got built to a certain point, and maybe I don't know what state it was when it left, but like then it got shipped off to Buddy to paint in pieces, and I was like, man, how the heck did you manage to get the car back together to even the point it was when we saw it? There's so many weird little brackets and things underneath, and I mean all kinds of cool CNC little parts and widgets and whatever you want to call it. Went to him with hey, like, get this stuff chrome, get this painted, powder coated, whatever, and he got it back together to a certain point, and then and I don't know, there's a lot of like who knows what in the background of what was done and not done before, after, and during, but it came to us, and I was like, he wanted us to tidy up the wiring.
Yeah.
So we kind of went that route, and we talked with the customer and said, hey, like, this is what we've got. We went through and made like, there's like just a 2 or 3 page, 4-page book, essentially, of stuff that like, hey, here's provisions for all these things on the car, but there's parts missing that need to be, components that need to be mounted and put in place before you even wire it, let alone, make it all work.
Sure.
So from there, we went through, and I can't even remember probably half the stuff, but went through and I had to mount the computer. There's like an area on the cage in the back where you probably saw the pictures of the wiring stuff with the stuff out of the back seat. None of those components were mounted, and I think it had a different computer at one time. So like we kind of had to go back and remake everything and mount everything, and some stuff was stayed the same, but as far as a fire system, it has the air solenoids that work the part of the squirter stuff, part of the rams in the doors, and none of that stuff was even hooked up or there. There's like an air compressor, like none of that stuff was even there hooked up. So we had to like mount some of the stuff, and I mean, we could go on and on and on, and whatever, you know what I mean? But
yeah. So a lot of that type of stuff that you do, was that kind of like stuff where he had it done on the car and then you wanted to make it work, or you kind of looked at the car and said, man, well, if you're going to go this far with this, you might as well get at that and add this and do this and kind of pull these things together? Or
some of the stuff was like done, but not, some of it never got finished. I think the owner just got to the point where he was wanting to get the car done, but not realizing I don't think you ever really realize what it takes to actually build the whole thing and what goes into making everything work. It's one thing to like put a component in the car and, you know, and mount it, but actually
Yeah.
to make it work and function is a whole different deal too, you know?
Oh
And
yeah.
so it was kind of a point where it wasn't really, the car was never really finished, which, you know, typically I like to get everything as far done as you can before paint. That way, when you're going back together on the far side, it goes together without any issues. When you have to start cutting and fitting and clearancing after paint, it's like, man, you're just asking for trouble, you know?
You know, like when I took the car to Buddy, I'm like, I don't have the skill, the eye for detail, or the thought to look at a door hinge and go, okay, I'll get Allen head these, stainless that, this, that. Me, I'm the same as probably Steve was on that car. Like, man, I'm 80%. Let's just wire this pig and get it driving, because, you know, you work so long on a project that you want to get it going. But, you know, it's one of those things where I think it always happens on projects that they have a tendency to just go completely sideways. And in upcoming on the podcast, I'm going to do some, you know, kind of the top 10 things that you should be looking for or have a plan for when you're building a car. And one of those things that's pretty important is to have a plan. Built so much faster when there's a plan. When it's like, this is what I want, this is how I want it to look, you know, because sometimes the big sticking points in building cars is like, hey, well, did you want to do A or B? I'm still waiting. It's been 2 weeks.
Right.
Do you want to do, you know, this or that? And then it just delays the project. And then, you know, for all people involved, man, it just something that could take a year turns into 2, 3. And I think that car's 10 years in the making, I think, easily, because it was in the.
And he's still messing with it. Like, he won't even quit. He keeps doing stuff on it over and over and over and over. It's like, hey man, like, call it good and go on to another, you know, the next big deal. You know what I mean?
Well, and listen, I love that car, man. I think that car I love the seats in that car. I like a lot of stuff. I mean, I hate that it's black because I own some things that are black and they're only shiny and nice one time. And then as soon as you touch it, there's a swirl mark. And,
totally.
you know, I've got a split window coming out sooner or later, and we'll see. I mean, that car's coming out. It's that car. I'm going to do some of the things, like I'm going to do the wiring on that car myself, but you know, the paint body Buddy did. He did all the metalwork, paint body, suspension. Buddy assembled all the suspension on the chassis. So Buddy basically roughed the whole car in, did all the pretty shiny stuff, and then I'm going to button up all the loose ends when I get it back. And so, but that car has been a little while in the making. You know what I mean?
It's tough too, you know, like depending on, you know, what your budget is, you know, that's a big part. And it's like, hey, if you're going somewhere, it's in everyone's best interest to have, like you said, the plan going into it, you know. But you know, and every single one of them is going to veer off the trail a little bit. Like, oh, you know what? Hey, this came out, or hey, you know what? I decided now that it's coming together, I want to add this. That's cool, you know. But you got to stick to somewhat of a deal. I mean, you know, if you're a detail freak, and you know, every time something new comes out, you can't change everything, you know. And it's like sometimes you got to call good enough. But
it's expensive to go backwards.
Right. You know, if you do everything 2 or 3 times, you know, and it's tough too when you have multiple parties involved, because the reality is every party has a different idea of what should be done,
right?
What shouldn't be done. And that's fine. That's what makes them all different and everybody's creative thing. But there's kind of like a continuity when you're doing a complete car from start to finish that, hey, you know, I know how much room I want to leave for, you know, clearance here for a certain, you know, finish, like, you know, whether it's powder coating or paint or just certain way things go together, you know, in orders. And it's like, you know, you can't experience that till you've worked on it a little bit and figure it out, you know. It's like, so jumping around, it's kind of a really not a recommended thing, you know. I mean, I hear guys that come to my shop all the time that are like, yeah, I have this car over the shop. And these projects are commitments, and you got to trust the customer, and they got to trust you. And if that's not there, then it's not a good mix, you know, because ultimately you got to be able to work together for, you know, let's say an average build is 2 years on cars. You got to be able to work together in that time. And then, you know, if you're doing something real crazy and hand built, it takes even longer. So if you're not on the same page with somebody, it's, you know, kind of like being in a bad relationship, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not healthy, you know what I mean? But
without question,
it's good because I'll have guys that'll come here and they you know, I always end up with these cars that are derelicts that I have to, like, you know, go through and like fix. And it's, I think usually what happens is someone comes across a project and they start building it and they they're trying to do the budget route, and I think it just comes down to communication more than anything. Everybody's idea of I just want an 8, and then this person wants a 10. Well, your version of an 8 and my version of an 8 are probably in two different spots sometimes,
Right.
So there's that issue. And then when you got someone that's got a car somewhere else, they're like, hey, I don't want to spend a lot of money. I just want to do a budget. So they kind of might get something, do something in a hurry. We'll say, for the better lack of terms, hack it out. And then they're having issues with something not fitting right, or, a hood's crashing into something, or, you get a chip paint, whatever. There's all kinds of weird stories I can tell you, over the years. But
yeah. So
when you ultimately get into that point, people are like, oh, I'm going to take this car from this guy. It's like, hey, you're almost done. You're at the finish line. You would be out of your mind to pull your car out of this other shop unless something detrimental is going wrong. But
sure.
To pull it out of there and have me try and figure it out, you're going to spend more money trying to reinvent the wheel. The car's coming out good and he's doing a good job, but there's all kinds of different,
well, and I think that's kind of the thing, you really got to, one of the things about building a car, you also got to qualify the shop you're taking it to.
Right.
I don't think you roll into a place with the name fabrication in the name and you're rolling in there on a budget. I mean, because your purpose for going in there, it's like they're going to you because they see the fabrication, the custom stuff that you do, their air cleaner, their air cleaner that was made, and that's $1,500. And right. Some people, they don't wrap their mind around that. Like, that's got, it's got 25 man hours in it, and it's aluminum, and it's welded, and it's polished, and it's this, and it's like, and so some people, I don't know if you remember my Type 34 Ghia, the gray Ghia on the Cosmics, that car, if something on that car, and I got to a point with that car where it was like, screw it now, like I'm already this deep in it, I can't half step it from here. So like the exhaust system I had in that car, perfect example. The exhaust I had built by a company on the East Coast called Tangerine Racing. The guy just builds 914 exhaust. The guy custom built a TIG welded exhaust from the East Coast that had a can and an exit proportion that came out in the factory location. When you start getting in that game of like building these next level cars, you're the same as street rod and hot rod money. I think I saw an ad.
No, totally.
I saw an ad in Haggerty this week that said how to spend $2.3 million to win $10,000, getting the Riddler Award. That Cadillac that won the Riddler. The guy died by the time the car was finished. The poor guy died. Didn't even see it finished. Spent $2.3 million to win $10,000. But when I'm doing something like that, I'm not trying to build something that you just walk past. I'm trying to build something that when you see it, my crew cab, the carbon cab, people know it from when they see it. The Bull Run bus, they know it from when they see it. And so I want to make sure when I build something, people remember, like, man, that's one of Bill's cars, and I remember it. And if you're going to go down that road, that's not a cheap road to go down. And I tell people all the time, if they're looking to do a car, like, I had somebody tell me the other day, I want to get an old bug and get it restored, and I said, that's $50,000 on the cheap side. What? 50 grand? I'm just talking about body off the pan, no custom work, body off the pan, metal work, paint, a restoration. I had Cooker on last week, and he says $50,000 is the cheap end on a full blown blow apart restoration, because part of the thing that maybe people don't grasp all the time is that there are very few artisans anymore that can blow apart a car, put it back together, do it correctly, use the right parts and pieces to put it together. Because, anybody can take it to a shop like, I found this super cheap shop, and they've used, it's a Volkswagen, they use all American bolts in there, but no big deal. They retapped everything, or, just nonsense. You know what I mean? So, right. I mean, listen, you want to play the part, you gotta pay the cost, man. So
well, it's funny, like you're talking about two things. I already forgot the one in my head now. I've been sitting here thinking, holding my pause.
No, go ahead. Jump in, man. Jump in.
Dang it.
Well, we were talking about when people ask me about building a car, like I want to buy a bug and build it. I tell them, like, just go buy one done and armor all the tires.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to head to was, I'll get guys come in and they're like, I want to build a car. I got some way, but usually they don't want to tell you. No one's like, hey, I want to drop 150, 200, 300 grand on a car. They come in and I have some money, but it's like a taboo subject sometimes. It's like, well, for me to know where we're headed, we need to get a number. If you think you're going to spend $25,000, that's not going to get us any parts, And,
Right.
I tell guys, you want to do in the higher end stuff, by the time you pay for paint, parts, I mean, every part for the whole car, powder coating, plating, I mean, you're going to be pushing $100,000 to get all the higher end stuff. And that's without
Wow.
me ever touching it, And,
Oh
and right
yeah.
there, it's like, to me, it's like, well, I'd rather try and scare somebody off. Like,
Right.
hey, if you're happy about, doing it, and like I said, it's commitment, and you got to know that you want something, and you want something that's different from what everybody else has or what you can go buy, and you
Well,
know,
and part of that I think kind of plays into what you do, because you've got the fabrication side, and then you've also got the F2 supply, where you're starting to pull stuff that you made back in the day, kind of mass produce it a little bit. I don't want to say mass produce like it's stamped in China. It's still TIG welded, nice
yeah,
stuff. So the oil cooler brackets and stuff that you're making, but
right,
like those things where, okay, I can take this, process this to a point, give somebody a custom touch for a few bucks more than they'd pay for like a regular old cheap cooler.
right,
But this way they got something cool and do that. So kind of with your business, you don't got a line of people knocking on the door to spend 100 grand doing fabrication work. So you got to kind of diversify from a business standpoint, like where you're at. So having that bread and butter stuff with the F2 supply side and then the fabrication side kind of balances it out, because that whole process of get the customer, pinpoint what they're doing, lay it out, put the best budget you can together. But it's tough it's hard. You can't put a budget on custom stuff because it's open ended.
no, it's really hard, and that's why it's good to know in the get go, like, hey, what let's get a plan together and see where we're headed, because part of the budget determines that. But then, also, as you're going on, you tell someone, hey, you're going to spend, let's say, middle of the road deals, probably nowadays out here, it's 200 grand, no problem to build, a basic entry level deal. And you start on something like that, and it sounds like, wow, I'm going to have to write you a check tomorrow for 200 grand. No, it's going to be over the next couple years. And then, I got some that guys are on a budget, so you spread it out more and you work on it a little less, and you kind of work around that sometimes. But as you get going, it's like I haven't worked on one customer's car yet that they weren't like, okay, let's go ahead and, I want to do this too. Or they see something else on another guy's car, and they're like, oh, I really like that. Let's do that too. And it's like, okay, I mean, that's all good. You don't have to sell anybody anything. They sell themselves. But,
Right.
ultimately, it's like we want to do our stuff, and do it correctly. We don't want to be hogging out holes, making them oblong to put stuff
Right.
together. The stuff needs to go together correctly. You don't need to use a come along to put stuff together, and and obviously it's got to look good. You know what I mean?
No,
And
absolutely.
the longer we're all in this business, the more you get about stuff that you see and you do, and you learn new things and new tricks. And we were talking about the parts a little bit ago too. I was going to say,
Yeah.
guys see like, hey, these parts are, X amount. This rubber's, $20 from so and so. Okay, well, it's great. Like, you go buy these, and this goes over into whether it's Volkswagen, whether it's, early Fords or Chevy stuff, whatever. You see all these aftermarket parts, and it looks like they're all really cheap. But the reality is, when you go to try and bolt it on the car, it's like, wow, this doesn't go together. So now
Right.
you kind of really need to pre-fit everything before it goes to paint, because if not, you're going to be hogging on something that's painted, and you can see the cars that have been pre-fit before and the cars that were fit after. You got to live with some stuff because you didn't know, hey, this grill's a quarter inch wider than the original one, or whatever it
Right.
is. There's always something weird that you need to make fit and work right. And I think that's where the real, a lot of the talent comes from, guys. Is the more they've done and the experience they have in it, they know how to make the stuff work and how to manipulate it and make it work. We get cars that, every so often here that, hey, this window rubber keeps falling out. It's like, okay, well, it's a different shape than the original, so you got to cut and grind and do stuff and glue it in place and whatever it is, But it
Yeah.
goes like that for every aspect of the car, So
And so bringing that back to what you do at Foothill, like the majority of stuff that you do at Foothill Fab is, will you just work on chassis for people or whatever? Like they need it fab, they bring it in, they get some stuff done, or do you try to do complete builds, or kind of what's your forte on the
you
fabrication
know,
side that you'd prefer to do?
I like doing the complete builds, and starting out, I thought, oh, we're going to do all this crazy stuff. And, we started out, I quit my job at SoCal Speed Shop in 2000 or beginning of 2006. Like January 1st, I was here, That was the start of my deal as far as full time. We had it here a couple years before doing stuff on the side, but when I started,
And that's just before the recession.
Exactly. I was like, dude, Mike, I got this. This is gonna work out. And, you start getting a little traction, and all of a sudden, like, the clouds come over and everything's just falling down. You're like, wow, this is crazy, man. Like, you kind of got to the point where you feel like you're making a little headway, and then like everything falls out. I had like 3 or 4 guys all at the same time. We're like, oh man, I got to stop on my car, and you're like, oh wow, this is gonna get hairy, and
Yeah.
we kind of just zig and zag and figured it out, and kept going. But
and what's funny is if you look at the car show scene, you see the same thing. 03, 04, 05, 06, when the economy was just booming and jamming, people are just dumping money into cars, doing all kinds of stuff. You hit 2007, it stops. Everybody's like, don't. I got to pull the plug on that project. A couple properties I just had did X, Y, and Z or whatever the case is. So,
right.
You look at you'll see cars that weren't getting, like, some of the big level cars weren't coming out during that time because of what happened in the scene. And so you worked at SoCal Speed Shop for a while?
Right.
And who'd you work there with? Was Ryan working there too?
Yeah. So we had all worked for, actually me, me, Scott Howard, which people call him, or his nickname's Dirty Scott, and Ryan. We all worked with his brother, or for his brother, down at a plating facility in Temecula. They made reflectors and stuff. And at the time, I think we'd all like started getting laid off of work. So I went and worked for Fat Jack. And in the interim, I actually was working for the race car guy, but he was kind of more, like I said, a street racer. So they ran their deal. They like to work till midnight, and started like weird times. And I was like, you know what, I need a normal deal. It was cool. I learned some stuff there, but from there I ended up at Fat Jack's, and that was really the hot rod side of things. And I was in the middle of building my car at the time, and then worked there for a little while. Well, during that time, Ryan had come to work there, Scott had come to work there, and we were there for a couple years. Then Ryan had left and went to SoCal. And, of course, naturally, a little bit after that, I ended up leaving and going to work at SoCal. And then it's a long, drawn-out story, but, I ended up working for a small sheet metal guy out in Huntington Beach for a while because I wanted to learn more of the sheet metal repair and shaping and stuff like that. And then one of the guys I had worked with at SoCal, this old timer, and you guys will probably remember him from the TV show, his name was Roy, kind of a crotchety old dude that did sheet metal work. He kept calling me, hey, why don't you come over to Boyd's? And I'm like, nah, I'm good where I'm at, And finally, I ended up kind of getting to the point where I was like, I really want to do my own thing. And I ended up getting my first shop, and I basically left, was at Boyd's, and then left and went back to SoCal. I kind of worked there twice. There, I don't know, this is going to get real confusing. At SoCal, and Holly used to own them at one point. This is probably all sounds like
no,
podcast,
man.
Dude, but
people are people are interested to know the backstory of what's going on behind the scenes.
I worked at SoCal, and I got sidetracked. So I was at Fat Jack's.
Right.
Kind of got me into SoCal. I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and Holly, the carburetor company, had owned them at the time, and they were going through a lot of weird stuff. And that's when I kind of was like, you know what, like things are just trippy here right now. And I left and went to work for the sheet metal guy because I wanted to learn some different stuff. And some guys that were like, hey, go talk to these guys, kind of pointed me in the right direction. So I went, did that for a while, and I was kind of getting the itch to do my own deal, right? So we kind of started renting my first shop, and I had left and went back to Boyd's through Roy. Roy was kind of kept bugging me. I was like, you know what, that'll be a little closer to home and, just a better setup. So I worked there for a little while, and then SoCal had called me up and was kind of like, needed some help with their product development and some other stuff, and working on the cars again. I was like, okay, they'd kind of been bought back from Holly at that time. So I was like, all right, I'll come back. I was like, yeah, that's close to home. It's a good familiar place. I had friends with everybody there, and everybody there was the owner, his wife, his son, were all cool people I got along with really well. So I was like, okay, I'm back there. So I went back there and spent another few years there, and then when I left from there to do my own thing.
So now I remember watching the TV show and seeing that guy Roy, and he seemed like a real old crotchety cat.
Oh, totally.
But
he was entertaining to be around, and when I was working at SoCal, there was Roy, And next to Roy was this other guy named Birdman that taught me a lot of stuff. And he was kind of like, I'm still, was really close with Birdman. And but Roy and Birdman were like polar opposites. Birdman was like, everything's got to be a certain way and keeps his area real clean. Where Roy was like over there sneaking cigarettes and doing his thing. Probably put a little something in the coffee too. And he was just a character by all means. But it was funny to see them two go at it and like a dynamic that like kind of like the Odd Couple. You know what I mean? It was kind of fun. But we had a good time together. But Roy ended up back at Boyd's, and he had worked there in the early days, and before when they were Hot Rods by Boyd, and then later on it was I can't remember what it was called now. Boyd Cotting's Garage.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he finished out his time there until he had passed away, obviously. But when I went back to SoCal, I kind of did my deal there. I got to learn kind of about doing the product stuff, and as far as from prototyping to getting it in the package and out the door. So that kind of helped me a little bit in some of the stuff I'm doing now. So it's kind of cool. But
yeah, because I was checking some stuff out on your Instagram, and I saw there's a pan you have over there, and it's got a tunnel and like an access panel for the tunnel. That's like a round deal on the side, and I thought like, oh man, that looks really cool. You know what I mean? Because an access panel is a lot easier than pulling the pedal assembly every time, because that's like a 45-minute nightmare no matter what you're doing.
Sure.
But it's like those little pieces, parts, and details are kind of the custom things that are kind of like, form and function come together to where you can make it look really cool and kind of do some things like that. So the artistry of learning that fabrication work is not something that is just natural, because working with different kind of metals and different kind of whether it's thick or thin or lead or steel or whatever, it just takes practice and technique. Some of the stuff that you've learned from the old guys, man, is stuff that you can't go to Wyotech and learn that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like these guys have been around, and I'm not disrespecting Wyotech, but what I'm saying is
no, I get you.
As things have evolved, it's like, Southern California is kind of the epicenter of like the hot rod deal and cars and all that kind of stuff. Right. And a lot of those guys have been around forever. So, I mean, that's awesome that you've got a background where you were able to learn from all these dudes that just had so much history, and you get to, know them on a one-on-one basis and take. That's kind of what we have in this life, where we can give to somebody else, is like what we know and what we can teach somebody else. And sometimes I know I can speak for my brother who's got a shop. He has the toughest time just finding a good, hardworking kid that wants to come and learn something.
No idea, man. That's probably the hardest part of the whole deal.
And it's crazy, because, in this new generation of kids, they don't have that connection to cars, I think, like we do, because a car to them has been replaced, and it seems stupid to say this, but it's true. A car to them has been replaced by the iPhone. In other words, when we want to go to the mall or go to the movies or do something, like, we had to have transportation, and it wasn't cool to roll up to the mall taking the public transpo, like rolling up in the bus. You know what I mean? You had to take your buddy's car or steal your buddy's mom's car, whatever it took.
Right.
But it's like nowadays kids just hop on the phone and they're in the virtual mall, and it's like, it's crazy, So it's like, it takes guys like us that are still in the scene. I know my boys, they're car guys because they have to be. Like, they're in the garage. I'm like, nope, get off the games, come out in the garage, work on the car, clean this, do that. And what's funny is when they sit and do something with their hands and they can take a step back, like, wow, man, I did that. That's so cool. That personal sense of accomplishment. Like, instead of just being a consumer all day and consuming things, they actually created something that day.
Yeah. And I think, and I try and tell guys, young guys are like, oh, I want to do this. It looks like fun. And it's like really something, it's got to be in your heart. If you're not into it and you don't love it, and, it's going to end up being just a job, and you're going to not like it. If you love it, then you're going to push yourself to learn and do new things and better yourself. Like when you start out, I look back to where I started, when I started building my oval, I didn't know how to weld. I was like, hey, I got to find somebody to, I got the apron fit to it. I got to find somebody to weld it on,
Right.
And at the time it was like, man, this is just, something I was like, oh man, well, I'll even go back further. When I was in high school, metal shop class, I started trying to weld in there, and I was like, man, I don't know how to do this. So I kind of like gave up. I thought you were supposed to either you could do it or you can't do it. I didn't know any better, at
Right.
15 or whatever. Then I realized later it's like, oh, you got to practice, and no matter what you're doing, whether it's building cars, painting cars, even if it's being a computer guy, you got to practice this stuff and figure it out. And you got to make mistakes to be able to move forward and do better. You can't just be perfect out the gate at anything you do. You gotta learn your limitations by ruining some stuff first. And I think a
Oh,
lot of guys don't understand that. But
it's funny because you look back at that apron back then, you think like, oh man, now I got to find somebody with a welder that knows how to weld this and do all the super complicated stuff. And now you've got a fabrication shop where you're TIG and MIG and doing all kind of
right,
different kind of welding. And meanwhile, you look back at that, but it was your barrier to entry. What I tell people all the time is sometimes the hardest thing is just to do it. As I talked to my brother yesterday, and my brother's got a shop here in town, and he was block standing the side of a bus, and he's like, "Yeah, my arms are on fire. I've been block standing a bus all day. Blah blah blah." And I said, "Yeah, I worked at a Corvette body shop when I was like 13, right? Under the table, working there, making fiberglass molds for
right,
fiberglass
lots of
parts."
fun.
And I'm like, "Yeah, I did that, man." I was like, "It sucked." Like I realized at 13 when I was working on something with a piece of sandpaper, I was like, "Nah, this does not seem like a good time to me." But I think it takes a certain kind of personality, like a guy who's not a real super social person. That's okay, just him in that car all day, just working
Sure.
on the car, detailing, doing that kind of stuff. Otherwise, if you're trying to do it, you're going to realize you're going to try to rush through it and not do such a great job. And there are people that can put that time and effort and wait to see the result. I'm not that guy. That is for sure. I'm too heavy with a hammer. That's for sure.
Oh, it's tough too. Like you spend a lot of time and you get intimate with every bit and corner and piece of the car. And at the same time, you got to be okay with that. And there's times where you could spend a whole day working on something and end up ruining a part at the end of the day. And you're like, okay, well, there goes profit for today and tomorrow, and the next day, because it is what it is, and it happens time to time. But you know, but being as the guy, the kid building or doing stuff, think about it like if you're working on a car, like when you first started working on your cars, like if you didn't know how to do something, what would you do? You either try and find someone, an old timer that knew, or you
Right.
hit up your dad, and if they didn't know, you hit up someone else's dad or whatever, so you can figure it out. Heck,
Yeah.
nowadays you can go on YouTube and figure out, how to
Everything.
put a new air conditioning unit in your house.
Everything. Yeah.
It's crazy to me. I mean, heck, I use it all the time for stuff. I'm working on a new car. Oh, how do you fix that? Okay,
Boom, right there. Yeah, it's
right,
crazy. It's
wow,
like you have that, and I think part of what that does is because you have that instant access, you don't retain anything. So you're like, I'll just go to YouTube
hello there.
and I'll do that, and then we'll just bing bang boom. You know what I mean? You'll just kind of go through that and go on the internet, grab it, look at it, fix it, move on to the next thing. But it's that process. I think everybody that buys a Volkswagen ends up with an idiot book. You know what I mean? And you all get that idiot book, and you're like, oh, okay. You start reading this book and figure out how to check to see if your main bearings are all blown out. You know what I mean? Or see
Right.
what's going on. But it's like all those little parts and pieces. That's what we had to turn to. It's like, okay, here's this 250-page book I got to flip through and try to figure out you know what I'm going to do to get my car fixed. But you know, it's it's one of those things where I think us as the generation of who we are, we can try to make a difference with the kids that we're around. I
Oh,
know
totally.
when I've got my son or any of his friends, I've got my bus, and so we'll grab all the boys and just throw them in the bus and go. Me as a kid playing with Hot Wheels is kind of when you see a cool car on the street and then you're like locked in and focused. And then when you're driving something that's super cool and everybody's just gawking at you, it's just a totally different feeling. And you see, because that's what I do when I take the bus out. Like if I was taking kids to like church dances and stuff like that, I'd load them in the bus and we'd cruise down the strip going across town to go to a bus a Friday night. And these kids, and I'm just blasting music, and these kids are just like, their eyes are this big, and they're like, everybody's looking at us. They're taking pictures. And
Right.
I'm like, welcome to being a curbside superstar. I'm like, that's what happens when you're rolling a dope ride like this, when you're looking cool in your car. But it's like, that's that. I think for us, like that's kind of what hooks us in as car guys is like we're chasing that dream to be that dude that we saw cruising down the boulevard that like that dude's got no problems.
You see
Oh.
some of the stuff
But
you remember back, you seen like what you thought was a cool car at the time or whatever, and you hear set 48s or whatever flying by you, and you're just like, oh, like it just gets you fired up. You want to be
oh
racing
yeah.
or doing something, or and it's like then as I got further into it, for me, it was like, as I'm building something with my hands, you said earlier, you know, I was like, to take like just a rectangular chunk of metal or something and form it into something and then have it on the car and look like it's supposed to be there. And, you know, if someone saw it, maybe they said, you know, to me, the ultimate compliment is like, oh, where did you get that? Is that an original this, or is it this? You know, no, I made that myself, you know. It's like, oh, it looks like it's supposed to be there, you know. And I think that's when you know you've made some right choices or gone down the right path sometimes is you built something that looks like it's supposed to be there. If you built something that looks like it's not supposed to be there, then everyone's going to let you know.
Sure. But wiring, like my new car, my new car that I'm, when I get my split back, my intention is there's a controller called Ride Controller, Wi-Fi connected to a relay panel. So you basically put an iPad, integrate it into the car, and that Wi-Fi is to a control box that controls all the relays. But it's like the technology's here now where I think it's so cool. But, you know, and really you just from outside of that, you just wire it regularly.
You know, some of the Volkswagen stuff we've done, obviously you're buying what was it, Wagon Works or whatever the guy's name, I can't remember his name anymore, but you put in like a factory reproduction wire harness, or, you know, a lot of the stuff we've done, you know, like the gray car we're talking about, we built a custom harness, and like that one, you know, one time I bought a bunch of spools of different gauge, you know, cloth covered wire, and then we basically built the harness to a certain point, and then we took it to the guy I got the wire from, and he's got this old machine he's got a couple of them, I think they're from, I want to say early 1900s, maybe even one of them I think might even be from the late 1800s.
Really?
But there's all these spools of different types of thread on there, and you put a tracer in, you know, you pick a certain color and you put in, and it kind of puts these cross tracers in it. Noisy machine, man. Like this thing turns on and you can't even hear yourself talk to anybody or yourself talk to yourself even, but it's going and making all this noise, and it, you know, you feed this harness through, you know, and he goes through and he show me how he terminates it, and, you know, then starts the next leg of the harness. So he does all the small legs and then, you know, does the main part, and he kind of pokes through and it comes out real cool, you know, kind of you know, if you're doing earlier stuff, you know, and it's kind of, everything has its spot, and, you know, it's kind of a neat thing, you know what I mean? But we also like doing the other stuff too, where it's like, hey, you got everything lined up perfect and zip ties every, you know, inch and a half, and, you know, I don't know, this stuff, it's gratifying to do that type of work sometimes. You look at it and you're just like, hey man, it's, you know, I know it's just wiring, but it also looks kind of neat, you know, it looks cool. So
well, but that's one of those differences. Like a detailed wiring harness is the difference of when you open that hood and you don't have to get a wiring cover because the wiring looks so good you want to show it off. You know what I mean?
So
go ahead.
When I had the oval window, I'll give you some more backstory. So I had the car. I sold it basically to help, you know, start the business, get married, bought a house, you know, all this stuff at one time. And for what I sold it for at the time, I sold the car for $28,000, and it was like, people were like, "Oh, that's crazy," you know, cars aren't worth that much.
That hurts. That hurts.
People had no idea, and at the time, that was like probably the most any cars had sold for.
Big dollars for a bug. Big dollars for a bug.
Yeah, and you know, it really, if you would have added up the parts, you're well above that to build something. But anyways, so, you know, a little time goes by. The car had changed hands a few times and ended up with Bond that had that gray car, and he had the car, and I heard about it was up for sale, and you know, a part of me wanted to buy the car back to keep, and at the time we were going through. The economy was basically starting to nosedive.
Yeah.
And I had just had, like, you know, me and my wife were, I guess I'll give you the personal side note. I don't tell a lot of people. I told my close friends all know about it, but, you know, I don't go advertising it on, you know, social media and all that stuff. Just kind of keep it private usually. But I ended up, my wife was pregnant with twins, and we lost one.
Oh.
And my other daughter, you know, with cerebral palsy and autism, blah, 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 all this stuff, you know, and it's like, it was kind of a weird time for us. You know, we were kind of like hit pretty hard, and then all the economy stuff started happening. It was like, man, we're just kind of like in this weird thing trying to figure out how to survive and get through and, you know, do our deal. And so it was challenging. But at the time, a friend of mine was like, hey, you know, we bought the car back. He put up the money, we bought the car back, and I had to pay more to get it back than I sold it for. So it was kind of an interesting deal. And,
wow.
The car had been used a little bit, so we cleaned it up, and, you know, there was like the hood needed the front of it resprayed. It had a bunch of rock chips, just did little cleanup and detail stuff. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
from there, Randy, old bug Randy, put it up on his site for sale, and it was like getting weird because little time was going on. Had a couple guys that were interested in it. A couple of them backed out. One guy was Australia. He never produced, and another guy, back east, flew out, looked at the car, wanted to make some changes to some stuff that I wasn't necessarily fond of. But
right. You're like, no thanks.
he was going to buy the car, and he ended up going back home and never ended up buying it. The stock market took a dump, and he decided, oh, hey, I don't want to pull any money out right now or whatever. So I was like, all right, well, it is what it is. And then I got a call from a guy in Florida, and he's telling me about the car and, asking questions and, on down the list. And he's asking about the wiring. He's all, the wiring in that car. He's all, if the wiring's that nice, the rest of the car has to be nice. I'm all,
right.
Yeah, that's accurate, and I'm all, there's stuff that, to me, if you saw the car without interior in it, without door panels on it, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy's a nut, but stuff that nobody's ever even seen probably till this day because the stuff's probably never been off of it. But,
right.
But hopefully someday in 100 years, someone will pull apart and be like, wow, this was done pretty good. But anyways, this guy ended up buying the car, and, and it sold for more than what, we had bought it for, obviously, because my buddy wanted to make a little money off of it and whatever. So
sure.
This guy ended up with a car. The car, I think, sold for, it was like 42 or something like that.
Still cheap?
Yeah. Went to Florida, and it was there for 4 years. Probably, probably been 5-7 years ago or something like that, right? Well, and I had talked to the guy a couple times, and then he calls me and it's like, hey, he's all, I kind of want to do something else. I want to build another car. He's all, every time I take the oval out, they're like, oh, hey, that's Aaron's car.
That's Aaron's car. That's Aaron's car.
Like, I want to build my own car. I'm like, okay, that's cool, I'm game. So we talked, and, he told me, he's like, hey, I'd like to do like the oval, but I want to do a rag top. I want a turbo fuel injection, it kind of kept upping the deal. Like, hey, I want to do a little bit nicer paint, nicer interior. I'm like, dude, this is a whole different deal completely. So
right.
We had the car up for sale, and in the meantime, we found him another car, a 57 rag top, and basically, started buying parts and started doing the build, and and we've kind of been a little bit more low key about it lately because it seems like everything's kind of, for better lack of term, hoarded out on social media. So
right.
We try to keep some of it a little more, under the roof here. But so, anyways,
under the radar.
Yeah. So we've been working on it and doing some stuff and kind of doing our thing, and it'll be a whole different deal. It's fun for me because I present him some cool ideas, and he's like, yeah, let's do it, and it's kind of makes it fun and kind of lights a fire again, you know what I mean? But
yeah, absolutely. So speaking to that, what level of input do you like to have with a build? Like, I mean, you obviously have to be into what you're building. What degree of input do you like to have, or are you hoping the guy's got your style that brings you the car?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what brings someone to you also is your
sure.
type of style, hopefully. And I've had a couple, where you don't even know, you're mentally, you're trying to decide, hey, is this guy wasting my time, or is this guy, serious? And usually the ones that you think are wasting your time are the ones that are serious, and the other ones are like down to some other deal next week, But we had a couple deals, like we did a 56 Ford truck, and the guy, came in and he wanted to like fill some holes in the bed and do just some little stuff. And next thing you know, we're building a complete truck with a new chassis under it. And, but trying to like, everyone's different, and you try to talk to some people and sometimes they can't visualize, what you're explaining. And maybe I'm not the best at that sometimes, but it's like, hey, I'm constantly thinking about this thing, thinking like, okay, well, this would be cool. Or, hey, let's do this wheel, tire, color, this, that, and it's obviously doing what I do. If everybody that came in the door said, do whatever you want, hey, we'd all be, everybody be doing this, right?
Right.
So, but ultimately, I think the best thing is, you got customers that come in and sometimes they want to do stuff that you didn't even think about, like, hey, I saw this. What do you think about this? Okay, well, maybe we could put a little bit of our spin on it and
sure.
do this. Yeah, cool. And really comes back to the same thing, the plan and being able to collaborate with somebody and, say, hey, I'll have guys too that will go and they'll start buying a bunch of parts, and you're like, hey, well, that's probably not the best part for what you're building, or maybe it's not the
Right.
best part for what anybody's building, but
Right.
you hope that over the years, been in the business for, gosh, 20 some years now, or whatever it's been. Doesn't seem like it's been that long now that I say it out loud, but you learn what's good at the time, and some things get replaced with something better, and but that's why someone should be coming to you, is for your expertise, and to say, hey, like, should I use this chassis or these brakes or this component, like, and you tell them, hey, this is going to work with this, and this is not going to work for what you're doing, and kind of get, like I said, a game plan together, and if you take it to even another step, you'd have someone do a drawing and a rendering of it, like, hey, I want to do this and modify, the roof a little bit, or change the back tail section on this, whatever it may be, just to get an idea.
Well, I think having a plan is really key. So just so I'm
Big
threading
time.
the needle and I got this right, just so I understand this. So the guy that you're building the oval for now used to own the green car.
Correct. Yeah, I didn't finish that story, did I? So,
well, no. I was just making sure that I was making sure I got that connected,
so
and that's the car.
Green car.
Yeah.
And then in the interim, right after we started on the new car, doesn't have a color per se yet, but he had it up for sale, and a guy from Canada ended up buying it. The guy had called me, and the guy from Florida, his name's Otto, cool dude, got a lot of car collection, all kinds of stuff he's into, and this guy from Canada, he's like, hey, I've talked to this guy, and he was trying to kind of quizzing me. I think he had a Carmen Ghia being built by a local guy for him up there in Canada or something.
Sure.
And he called me up and was asking about the car, and I said, look, you're for what you're going to pay for it, and he paid a little bit more than what I had even sold it for to Otto. And basically, I want to say he once I told him what it was going to cost to just build a basic car, he realized, wow, I'm money ahead if I buy this car. I'm like, yeah,
without question.
Keep it the way it is, and do your thing, But
he won't be hearing it in Canada. Hey, that's Aaron's car.
Yeah,
that's Aaron's car, eh?
Hey, Aaron, right?
Yeah, hey, Aaron's car. But
right.
that it's good and bad to a point. I mean, I think especially when you buy a car. So you also have to be a little careful too, because if you buy a car like a benchmark car, which that was a benchmark car when it came out, it said a benchmark, right?
Sure.
And when you buy that, it's like my Bull Run bus. My Bull Run bus, just because it was different in 03 having 17s and the Type 4 and all that stuff. Look, it's not a thing, but it was really different. It stood out for the time. Anybody drives that bus or buys that bus, it's going to be that bus. Oh, that's that one bus from, what do you call it? It never kind of stands on its own. And when I sold my Ghia, the guy buying it from me was like, hey man, kind of the bummer about it is no matter what, it'll always be your car. I said, nah, man, just change the wheels. You'll be good. You'll be good. Right. But I mean, there's something to be said about buying a car. Like every time that car is seen, like if you see that car somewhere, that's Aaron's car, and it's a super clean car, and it's really, really dialed in. So now I wanted to touch base with you back real quick about the wiring. So just some tips for some of our listeners that are out there that might want to go on your Instagram, which is Foothill Fab, and then also you've got a website, Foothills Fabrication, or are you just on Facebook?
Well, we got Facebook. I think we spend more time on the Instagram.
Social media.
We haven't, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Say somebody's got the determination to do their own wiring like that. What's a key tip that you can give them that is kind of the way you start? Do you like lay out all the parts, pieces, and switches first, and then run the wire? I mean, like what's just like a quick overview of like the process? I mean, obviously there's tons of detail, but the main process to make sure that it kind of goes together correct.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I and I can't say I do it all 100% on my own. Scott was huge on the wiring side of things. All the little technical things about, we need, this circuit breaker and this, relay
resistor,
component to make it do this. I let him handle that part of it. But as far as, the basics and the visual, obviously that's kind of like I steer that part of it a lot of times too. But, if I'm laying something out, I want to go look at like, okay, let me write down on paper, hey, what are all the components I have and I'm running? Electric fuel pump, am I running a line lock? There could be a basic deal, and it could be a whole different, thing if you've got electric windows on a car, if you've got tire squirters, if you've
Sure.
got, um, GPS theft protection stuff. I mean, just whatever your components are, you lay it out on the paper first, and then I kind of break it up on like, hey, where is this stuff going to be mounted, and it almost kind of start putting together somewhat of a schematic. Like, hey, I need 25 wires to go from front to rear of the car of each gauge size, and there's probably some places online if a guy that's a beginner. I know there's some books out there that hey, you're running a headlight that's X amount of wattage, requires this fuse size and this gauge wire, and that's probably the best reference if they're going to hand build a harness or something.
Sure.
If you're doing something like, hey, I've got a basic Volkswagen restoration, you could buy a harness and add to it. And that's probably the easiest way for a guy getting his feet wet, rather than when you're trying to go through and build something
Sure.
from scratch. It's a lot more taxing on your brain the first few times, but
you're back to a plan is your key point, like a plan, a schematic, kind of knowing what you're doing, getting all your parts, pieces, and options put together first, and then start laying it out. I mean, really, before you even strip one wire, you could be looking at a whole schematic and go, yep, I think I'm going to pay someone to build me this harness. Now, would you guys build a harness for someone if someone needed a harness, or no? You guys just do the wiring in the car?
Oh, we'll usually, let's say we have a car we're doing a complete, hand-built harness on, and I have some people will come in sometimes and say, hey, I want you to wire my car. I was like, okay, well, you got whether it's a 67 Bronco or if it's a 32 Ford, a 57 Bug, a split window Bug, whatever it is, Volkswagen bus, you name it. At the end of the day, you got a bunch of components you got to mount. Are you going to put an MSD in it? Are you, like I said, line lock, fuel pump, all these different things. And it's like, okay, well, there's a bit of time in just getting the stuff mounted before you ever start wiring it, and trying to, some guys will come, they got this box of parts. Yeah, I want you to wire it. Well, hey, wiring it's one thing, but like mounting all those components in the car and getting them in the right spots and making it work with other stuff that's already there, that's a bit of time too. So, there's a difference in cost, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
But,
sure.
You get past that point of it, we'll basically get all our stuff mounted, and with doing it, numerous times over the years, we try and lay stuff out in a way where you have room to run the wiring and not, I'll see stuff that comes in sometimes and there's like, a guy would have like relays and he has like, say the car's got 10 relays all in one spot and they've got like, a bunch of them stacked together, and it just kind of gets to be a cluster of mess of stuff, and it makes it a lot harder to route the stuff in a nice fashion. So finding that out, kind of takes a little bit of thought, where you're going to ground your components and, on down the list, I mean, there's a lot of factors in it, but usually we'll get every component laid out to where we think is going to be, sufficient room to run our harness and do our stuff. And then we kind of, usually we'll start with the bigger wires, our main power stuff. And, we'll say, hey, we got, X amount of foot. Let's start with that guy. And then we're going to add into it, we'll go down our list and say, okay, well, we need these other, X amount of wires for these components. We're going to build that part of the main harness and kind of get it laid out in the car. And then from there, you kind of got some sub harnesses and, different things that you add into it. But, you'll get the main bulk of it into the car, lay it out and kind of figure, whether you're going to heat shrink the harness or you're going to zip tie the harness, and kind of figure out which way you're going. And then you kind of do your breakouts off your main harness. And, from there you can go back and pull it out. You might have the main harness laid in there and a couple ends connected to figure out where it's going to be and secured if you're trying to run it real super crazy, let's say. And then you'll kind of figure out your breakouts and you'll take it back out of the car and, you'll add your heat shrink or your cloth covering, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? And it's like that for every part of the car. A lot of times you'll have little jobs on each section of the car where you're building something, and you're going to put it in the car and you're going to take it off, and you're going to put it in the car and take it off. It might be coming in and out of the car. A fender might come on and off the car, 20, 30 times, maybe in one day to fit and, change a gap on something. I mean, it's very labor intensive. And that's the part that, like, if a guy comes in and sees, hey, this gap looks terrible. Well, yeah, we gotta cut this and reshape the whole thing. Now, he might come in and it looks all perfect already and not realize how much work it took to get from point A to point B, and be like, then when you tell him like, hey, whoa, how long did it take? You're like, yeah, it's a lot of work, dude. You gotta take this, you gotta cut, this whole section out, mount it up to the car so it, holds its shape and piece, and so I try to walk everybody through that though as they come in, and it's nice. The guys that are, we got stuff we do for guys that are out of state a lot of times, but we got stuff that we do for locals. And they'll come in every week and they'll see what's going on, and you like show them, and then they kind of get to see the process, which makes it easier in some parts. And some guys they don't really care. They just want to do it, get it done. But
yeah,
but you've done enough of it yourself. You know how labor intensive the stuff is, and the time it takes to do it and do it right.
Oh yeah, without question. And so, talking about like getting some of your inspiration for things. Now your shop doesn't work on just Volkswagens. You work on any kind of hot rod, whatever. What do you work on?
It's kind of funny. I did my car and kind of, I don't know if moved on from it is the right term, but, sold it, did all my stuff, moving on with life, doing your thing, and, I like everything, I like hot rods. I like off-road stuff. I mean, you had that trip down to Baja. That sounds like a cool time to me, man.
Oh, yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
I'm into all that. You know what I mean? But so for me, it's like not so much a matter of like, hey, I only know this. Sometimes people think, oh, you're just a Volkswagen guy or you're just a early Ford guy. It's like, for me, it's like, to me, it's not, I would say a challenge, but like, I'll look at anything, whatever it is, and it's a early Ferrari or a Hudson or a a new car, whatever it might be. I can look at it for myself and say, hey, you know what? Oh, I think this would be cool if you did this, and I might be building stuff in my head without even ever owning one or doing it for somebody. But, you look at stuff and think, oh, this is kind of how I would modify, or the cool thing I would do to change it. And, and it kind of crosses over into all these cars. I mean, I've got a Jaguar, a 56 Jaguar in the shop right now. It's, been kind of an ongoing deal with the customer. He's got a couple projects he's kind of jumps back and forth between, but, we've got, we just finished a 34 Ford chassis for a guy. We got to, basically set the car up the way we thought it should be set up as far as, height and stance and stuff. We got a 37 Ford in here for actually another Volkswagen guy, his dad's car.
Nice.
Paul Smoot.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been tinkering with that one for a real long time, but he's another deal. He's on a budget. But he wants it real crazy. So we've been doing that one for a while, but it's getting real close to going to paint. So that one will be cool to see finished. What else we got in here? The 57 Volkswagen. Right now I've got a guy that we've hooked up with that he just does early vintage German motorcycles. And
oh, really?
We're doing some sheet metal work usually. Like right now we're fitting the fenders on a 36 BMW. Motorcycle. What else? I mean, and it's not so much I try to jump around, but like you try to do nice work for people, and the word, it's all been word of mouth all these years. I've never advertised anywhere, so it's like, this guy tells this guy, and on down the list. So you get people showing up from all kinds of different walks of life, really.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge being a full blown fabricator with a history of working on hot rods, being, I would say, mostly known, at least in the VW scene, for building VWs. But the reality is quality workmanship and craftsmanship is hard to find. One of the things about the podcast is getting you out there, letting people know that really what you guys do. And it's because sometimes we, as much as, you have enough business because people call because your reputation, because Southern California, right. You're near 13 million people within a 100-mile radius. But the reality is there might be somebody sitting back somewhere just looking at a magazine, looking at that car you built, thinking like, man, I'd like to get a car like that. Oh, here's this guy, and he's got a fab shop, and that's kind of the purpose of my podcast, is to kind of get people to know the people in the scene that are doing things and did things and created things. And, also, I mean, I'm a bit of a car guy as well, all over. I mean, in my garage that I'm sitting here, besides my two buses you see over my shoulder, I've got a 65 Corvair, Riviera over there. I've got a car problem, all cars, and I see the uniqueness and inspiration that went into the design and development of these cars. And I see what I like when it's like you see something that someone took like Italian built cars have a specific style,
Right.
like that hand built kind of artisan type tubing and stuff like that. And when you see that crossed over with like a German design, because German is more function over fashion, like it's really engineered well. But I think when you can see those different styles put onto, put onto the cars, like when you look at Rod Emery and the 356s he does with like the leather hood strap, stuff like that.
Right.
That's kind of an Italian look that went on to the Porsche, which was kind of a race flavor. But, when you see those styles blended together, I think it adds to that canvas of a Volkswagen that we have. One of my favorite things about the Volkswagen is like you can really directions with a VW, from off-road to street to, rod buster. Coming up on the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Chris Addington, who built the Rodbuster Ghia.
Right.
I mean, that's a car that I think we all sit back and look at that car and think like, holy crap! Like,
for its time, I mean, it's like insane,
Man, that guy had to have $100,000 in that car back in 1985.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
I mean,
that's CNC back then was like kind of military or aerospace type stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it wasn't accessible to the common to the general population,
Right.
But that's that's what I love about the VWs is that you can really take a blank canvas of a Volkswagen and kind of make it any way you want it. Make it to where you look at the mega detailed early cars that are out now, fit, finish, and it'll give of a well restored early Mercedes. You know what I mean? Like that high level, high quality. And it's funny, and it's just by little tweaks. The seat upholstery, the nut and bolts for finish, paint quality, like all those things make such a huge difference because I was noticing, some of that 80s stuff is starting to come back from a vintage sample, like hunt down an original 80s car and let's see if we can get these guys to show up to these shows or whatever the case is. But It's like back then it was like 80% of everything came out of Johnny Speed and Chrome catalog. And then you either powder coated it to match, painted it, and then had some airbrushing done to it. And that was like the level of custom. Shaved door handles, suicide doors. Yeah, you know what I mean? Some louvers and stuff. So it's interesting to watch the scene.
Oh no, it's evolved for sure, and it's like as time goes on, there's always someone out there that's better than what you're doing or someone that's gonna be better. And you know what I mean? Like, it's cool to see different stuff, like if there wasn't so many different things going on, if they were all the same, it'd be boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why I think I love the variety as much as the VW scene is really kind of closed in.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is there's not a lot of VW people that go to hot rod shows with their Volkswagens. Right. I've always made it a point, especially locally, to go to like local hot rod shows, whatever. And people are like, Volkswagen, that's really rare. And I'm like, no, there's actually like 500 of them here in town, but these guys don't come out to hot rod shows. But
well, you know what, too? Way back, now I think it's more accepted. But like, when our cars got done, like my car and Ryan's car, we finished them similar to around. He got his done a little bit before mine, but around the same time, we'd go being in the hot rod thing, we would go to some stuff. But people looked at you like, oh, you're not allowed to be here, kind of attitude.
Right.
And there was kind of like a local deal. The guy we worked for, he was part of the club thing, this Outriders picnic, and we took our cars to that. And, we went in and there was one of the guys in the club was complaining that they can't be Volkswagens here. And Fat Jack that we worked for told the guy, those cars are nicer than anything else here. Why not, But after that, they didn't let any Volkswagens back for a while. I don't think there has been any other types of cars back since. But it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like taboo or a no-no. Just people weren't accepting of it. Now I think some of the older guys are kind of getting to the point where they've passed on or, whatever the case may be. But I think things are kind of more coming together. And I personally think in the next 10, 15, 20 years, it won't be a Volkswagen show. It won't be a Chevy show. It's going to be an old car show kind of more than anything, I think, if I had to analyze, I guess there'll probably still be offshoots of it. But I think as, the group gets older and it gets kind of tighter, more of it's going to be accepted together. You know what I mean? Like the good guy shows that are a little more kind of a little bit of everything kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's good parts to it, and maybe some bad parts to it too. But who
Well,
knows?
because of the age spread and things that are changing right now, even good guys. So good guys actually started allowing square bodies into the scene. Like so all the
Right.
square bodies up to like 1981, I think they're allowing into all the good guy shows. There's like a separate section for the square bodies
Yeah.
because there's so many guys that are our age that when we were kids, those square bodies were cool. They were like
Right.
the cool guy pickup, and now we're getting them and putting LSs in them or doing whatever, like our generation. When I say we,
Sure. Oh, no,
but
they're huge.
now it's affecting like, and the promoters of good guys were like, yeah, we've realized there's a big demand for that. We're making a change because it's not just buckets anymore, or all these things that are out there like that.
Right. Well, I think too, it all comes down to like a price point in some ways too. The entry level guy. Well, what car can he afford? We're getting to a point now. It's like, what car from the 90s, let's say, what's a young kid going to get into from the 90s that you want to see? There's not maybe
right.
like the Fox body Mustangs, and then like
I
some of the
have
Chevy
one.
trucks, and that's it, man. There's not like anything else. It's like you're not going to come out in a Chevy Beretta, and if you are,
No, I don't know if you got the Z24, bro. Yeah, but no, you're right. I mean, there's few cars from the 90s, but even still back then, there were still cars that were cool that were, you're talking the 454 SS pickup, all the
right.
OBS, all the OBS body styles, all those like the 899 Chevy trucks. I mean, I just had a Blazer, a 2-wheel drive Tahoe 2-door that just got totaled. Unfortunately, my son got T-boned in the thing. Luckily he's okay, but it was funny because I had to fight with the insurance company. I said, they were like, yeah, I'll give you $3,200. I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. I said, so I went on the internet and I printed 20 ads for 2-wheel drive 2-door Tahoes that were all selling for 10,000 or more.
Right.
And they, long story short, they ended up having to cut me a check. I had to do better research than the insurance company because they were just punching it in their computer, and 4-door Tahoe, 2-door Tahoe didn't matter. And I was like, no, you're going to check that real quick. And so, but like even those cars are now starting to push. The IROCs are starting to push. All the cars, Cyclones and Typhoons haven't quite hit it yet because I had a couple of those too. But, it's like there is some cool stuff back in those days. Just pick a Fox body. I've got a Celine Mustang that my buddy got his for high school, like for his graduation.
Right.
But that car is like those cars. So the Celines are now starting to push the Fox body. So all these cars are pushing. It's because guys our age are, well, I'm probably a little bit older than you. I'm in my mid 40s, but
what's a little older?
I don't know. I figure you're probably in your 30s.
I'm getting a little bald, so I'm 44. So.
Yeah. So we're only a couple years difference, and so, but right. all the guys our age, and statistically, people in their mid 40s start to buy the stuff that was cool when they were a teenager. That's why I went and bought a Cycle and a Typhoon and realized it wasn't the smartest thing to buy a 20-some-year-old GM that's been sitting in the sun. You got to find those cars like pristine.
Right.
But yeah, no. So tell me, let's talk a little bit about, so at the fab shop, you primarily do anything fabrication. Someone wants a chassis fabricated. Someone wants custom bodywork
I guess
stuff.
We could lay out a couple ways.
Sure.
I'll have guys that come in and it might be hey, I just want a chassis. I've got a jig set up for I got a chassis table we built, and we've got it set up for removable pieces for like a 32 Ford, 34 Ford, and anything else we kind of, we'll set up and mock up at ride height, take measurements, and we'll transfer it to our table and kind of have some custom spots for it on there, And, but, we get some jobs that are, depending on budget levels, it might be, hey, we're going to use a like a SoCal 32 chassis, or, whatever the job demands, you know what I mean? It's kind of a thing where like, okay, we get to build a chassis for this car. Okay, great. Then we'll set it up and we'll build it. And if we build it around, like we just did this 34. Now, you could go buy a Pete and Jake's chassis, let's say, and it's set up for, let's say, a small block Chevy and, a turbo 350 trans or whatever, but it's more of a basic thing a guy can order and get shipped to his house. and he can start bolting stuff on, and and if he has a little experience, he can get through it. But most of these projects, you're going to require someone with some outside attention, usually at some point. But
Right.
we could use something like that. But if you want something that sits a little lower, if you want to, this car had a Cadillac engine in it, a Tremec 5-speed, but it had a lot of things, had a winner's quick change in it, which I'm probably talking Spanish to the Volkswagen scene right now, right?
No,
And,
I think there's a lot of VW people that are cross
crossovers, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you've got this deal that's kind of like custom tailored to the customer, and you start putting things together. Well, there's so many different combinations you could do on these cars. You could build a jig for something, but I might not do that one again, ever. And
right.
You set it up like the 34 Ford, let's say. Well, there's a limited amount of foot space once you put some of these components in. So we raised the floor, we moved the floor back a little bit so that the transmission tunnel area doesn't intrude into your foot area so bad,
Sure.
And just little things we put into it to make it more enjoyable to drive. There's nothing like spending a ton of money on something and having it not be fun to drive when you're done, or be uncomfortable.
It's like cramming yourself in a kayak. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's stuff I've gotten in a car before. Like when I was at SoCal, we had a lot of cars we would do repairs on, and someone brings one of these cars in. It might have been around built 20 years ago, 25 years ago, in the 80s or the 90s, whatever it might be. But you bring it in, you get in the car, and you gotta push the throttle with the side of your ankle to move it.
Right.
I'm a little taller than most guys. I got a little longer legs at least. But,
right.
You see those things, you're like, wow, this is not something that'd be fun to drive around town or cruise in or drive across country. So, you want to make sure that when it's done, like, hey, this thing fits the person, and we'll take it as far as, you get the chassis done and you're building the car for the person. When it goes to upholstery, I make sure that, hey, the person who's going to be driving all the time, you need to go to the upholstery shop, you need to sit in it, we need to fit you to that car, make sure, as far as even when we're building it too, hey, I want the steering wheel location to be good for you. I want the shifter to be in the right spot for you, the pedals, the seat, like everything kind of plays together. Because if any one little thing's out of place, it's not going to be fun to drive. They're going to park it. And, I want to see people use their stuff, and it's better for me. If you drive it to everything, then, hey, oh, nice car. Like, who did your work on it? Oh, hey, Aaron and, at Foothill Fabrication, took care of me. Whatever, but if it's parked in the garage, no one ever knows,
And so you do chassis setups for like early Fords and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff.
We'll do chassis setups, whatever it is, whether it's a Volkswagen, like the Volkswagen we're doing, we narrowed the torsion housing, we built IRS trailing arms for it. We're getting ready to finish up.
Do you have a table? You have a table set for a VW? You have a table set up for VW?
Somewhat.
It's a pan, it doesn't need one.
Well, no, we actually set the stuff up and have some jigs for doing that work. So we kind of will take some measurements. Let's say at ride height, we got wheels and tires that we want to run. We mock them up usually, and then we take measurements and say, okay, this is the rake we want on the car and kind of the stance. Well, we've transferred that to our chassis table, and the car can go in and sit on there. It locates off of some of the pan mounting bolts that go to the body and to the torsion housing in the rear. And we've got some stuff that, right now this car's got a bus 5-speed that Dave Foltz is doing.
Bus 5-speed. Explain that to me. A bus 5-speed out of what?
So
is it an market speed kit on a bus, or is it a factory bus 5-speed?
So, it's a factory 4-speed, and
right.
Like Berg was doing a 5-speed kit at one time, and I think now they've kind of wound their stuff down to where it's like, they got limited runs of stuff and different things. So Dave Foltz started doing his own 5-speed kit for the bus, or for the bus trans.
Oh, really?
So we actually just kind of hit him up at the same time as he started doing them, and we actually got some of the first pieces to mock up with our build. And so we kind of set our chassis table up to run this 5-speed and be able to utilize, but we're changing it to IRS too. But to utilize, a stock torsion bar still to, clear everything and kind of fit. But this car's, going to be a whole different animal anyways with the turbo, and it's going to be kind of something that's, it's not going to be under the deck lid. It's going to be hidden underneath the car, and, trying to do some stuff that's different and, a little more, creative and, cutting edge, maybe, whatever you want to call it. But
I like it.
But I'm going off the tangent. But But ultimately, we've got the chassis table's got some Volkswagen stuff set up for it, on early Ford stuff. And then other than that, most of the stuff is custom, and we kind of set it up to per car. One car, you could build two different 37 Fords, and they might have two completely different wheel tire combinations, and it's going to make the chassis components mount in different places. So it really depends.
So if somebody brings you like a deck lid, a steel deck lid, and they're like, hey man, I want you to weld in some custom like impy air intakes. Can you, like, that's work that you'll do? Like if somebody brings you a deck lid and wants you to.
So if you scroll back far enough on the Instagram, you could actually find the one I did for the rolling blackout car.
Right.
I think that car's got like 5 hoods and 5 deck lids and whatever, but
right.
The incarnation right now is, he had actually Danny Gabbard did him a deck lid for that car, and beautiful job. And Danny does awesome metal work. And Steve decided he wanted something that looked more like the factory MP one, but they didn't make one for a 67. So
right.
We took one and, basically, recreated our version of it, as close as we could. And I think Danny stamped the MP, the badge logo onto the deck lid for him.
Nice.
We did that. I think we've done 1 or 2 of those now. Actually, the other one was a little bit different, was clearance for had some scoops in it that were actually to clear, like, what kind of size carburetors they were now. They were like a
52s.
58. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Something with a large velocity stack, and
right.
different car that Steve was doing. But anything along the lines of sheet metal, chassis work, wiring, basically we'll do everything here except the paint work. I mean, we don't assemble engines. We don't do the paint work here. We don't do the upholstery work here. But I got guys that we work closely with, that we have long-term relationships with, that we like what they do, and they work with us, and we can produce a complete turnkey car when you're done, or we can just do a chassis for you. It just really depends on how busy we are at the time, or what the person wants, or
all right.
We've kind of been under the radar over the last been doing this 12 or so years now on my own, and with the economy stuff and my personal stuff, it just we kind of have stayed under the radar. We haven't been out there doing shows, and and we had work the whole time too. But at the same time, I think it's kind of, I don't know if hurt is the right word, but kind of hindered. I don't think people know that we build complete cars or we do that type of stuff.
Yeah, because you guys are more at the shop and less on social media and doing that stuff.
Right.
And you're like, oh yeah, I got to get on social media and put something out there. The funny thing to me is within the car scene, there's so many things that are like the best kept secrets. Like Vegas is a place that where I'm from, it kind of bugs me a little bit. I remember I had heard that there was a Super Chevy was having a car show at the Speedway. I was like, cool, I'm going to go out there and check it out. This is Super Chevy, the magazine. I go out there, there's like 12 cars there. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But it's like, in the car scene, everything kind of becomes these best kept secrets. And like I said, my purpose with the podcast is kind of bring people, let them know about all the stuff, because I'm into so much of the VW stuff, and I've been in the game a little bit to where I've seen so many different people and cars and met guys like you and things like this. And that's why I'm kind of wanting to do this, to get people to know what you do, check you out, look at your Instagram, check out your Facebook and that kind of stuff. And so now with this transition, let's transition into F2 Performance and Supply.
So, we started this deal here. The Foothill Fab was the first, deal. And when I started, I knew I wanted to do some parts, and we've done a few different little things, machine pieces and kind of universal parts that go back and forth. We did I think one of our first things was a fuel filter that says F2 on the top, has our logo on it, and real neat piece. I just always had used stuff over the years that was it wasn't necessarily geared towards an early hot rod guy, but something that everybody could use that looked cool. It wasn't just a generic, like the old Fram orange top thing with what they called chrome, but it was silver base, just a Taiwan looking deal, right? Well, I was trying to do some stuff. To me, obviously, being the detail-oriented deal, I want to do something neat that, kind of stood out a little more, and most everybody that sees is like, oh man, I want one of those, so they end up putting one on their car. But, that was kind of our first go around with that. And then, we were doing some solid transmission mounts for the VW stuff. We did those for a bunch of years, and kind of got to a point we kind of hadn't done anymore. We actually just did a run of them literally got those done in the last month, and have them at the tumbling shop right now, getting cleaned up and getting ready to weld some together. But that was kind of our first Volkswagen part. And then during the process of working with Buddy on some stuff, we I want to say it was Gary Stell's car. We did the first,
Gia?
Yeah, the Gia. We did the first cooler mount. It was one of those things where it was like, he's got some stuff and he's good, with his customers, and he's got some price points he's working with. I was like, hey, I'll do this deal. And really, I never made any money off the stuff. It was like, I buy this cooler for like, $250, and then I spent like a day and a half on the thing. It's like, selling it for like, $450 or whatever it was. And it was kind of one of those things where it was like, well, it was kind of fun to make, but it was like, I didn't really make any money. So I did that one. Then it was like, all of a sudden it was like, hey, I need another one of those. I need another one of those. It was like, oh man. So I did a couple. We did some that were a little quicker to go together, but we've done, I don't know, we probably did 4 or 5 maybe on some various cars that he was doing. And I hadn't done any production ones at that point. It was kind of one of those deals where it was like, man, I'm, it's kind of burns too much time. I didn't really want to do them anymore. And then Dean Kirsten had one on his car. And then all of a sudden, I didn't know anything about it. I was busy with other stuff. And all of a sudden, I started getting like these massive amounts of phone calls. Yeah, I want to buy one of your oil coolers. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, the miscommunication, down the list, Dean had put it in the magazine that we were doing these cooler kits. And I was like, oh, dude, like I can't
the Foothills Fab oil cooler kit. You're like,
I'm like, I'm going to have to charge like,
dude, I don't have that kind of time to burn $1,000.
Yeah, it was going to be a deal. It was like, hey, if I did it for you, I'm going to have to charge you like $2,000, to build this cooler. It's just got too much time in it. So I kept getting these calls, and I was like, this is kind of crazy, like, I'm all, maybe I need to like revisit it and think, okay, maybe I need to do like a production version,
Streamline the design. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I thought, okay, here's what I'll do. I thought, I was building 1, maybe 2 at a time at the most. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do a run of like, I think I did 6 of them was the first deal. And I started building them, and I literally, before they were done, I think I had all 6 were sold, and I was like, all right, so there is something here. So then I took it to the next step. I took all my patterns and my dimensions and drawings to my local laser guy, and we talked and, did our thing. So he cuts me the pieces and, bins them. Then I bring them back and I form, the piece that there's kind of like a deal where it clamps to the torsion housing. And I've had a million people call me that want them for IRS cars. It doesn't work on an IRS car, unfortunately, because the trailing arm's right in the way. But on the swing axle stuff, it goes up to the torsion housing. It uses like a T-bolt style clamp, not just a cheap, radiator hose clamp, but it goes on there and clamps to the torsion housing. And it's got an electric fan on it. It's a Spall fan, Cetreb cooler. So it's all quality stuff. It's not like, my car that I built, the Oval, it had like the Mesa style cooler that you get,
sure.
Whatever, I can't remember the time, local, racing or whatever it was.
Yeah, off the wall.
Yeah, and then I went and bought a Spall fan, and like on my car and Scott's car, we mounted these oil coolers. They were the biggest one you could put on there at the time.
The 96
and,
pass, yeah, you got to cool it.
Yeah, did that, built an aluminum fan shroud for it, mounted Spall fans to it, and then took 1/2-inch tubing and made brackets and mounted them under our cars. It's like, okay, that's cool for that. So the modern evolution of it is these little Cetreb coolers are super efficient, way more efficient than the old, 96 pass deals. And basically we set it all up, got them cut, and I formed some of the pieces here, and then dimple die them, do all that stuff, weld them together, and start putting these pieces together. So we did, I think the first run we did that initial 6, and then we did like a run of 25, and those all went away. And I'm on my second, major run of them now, and I think we've done like, I don't know, maybe 10 or so of those. I mean, we've probably done near 40 or so of these kits, since we started doing them. And, we sell them with fittings, which I guess we'll backtrack there. So I kind of early on decided I wanted to, supplement everything and try to start a parts deal. And I thought, you know what, there's nobody right in my immediate area that sells, the end fittings and the hose. And I kind of enjoy doing the plumbing on the cars, making it look real nice, kind of like the wiring, So we ended up buying into XRP, and we opened up a store, had a little storefront, and kind of started going with that and trying to slowly add in our parts that we make,
sure.
to supplement. And that's actually, we haven't advertised any of it yet. We've kind of just got the ball rolling, and I have a long list of other stuff we're gonna do. Just finding the time is the hard part. So
are you making like fuel intake lines for carburetor setups and stuff like that?
I haven't done any of that stuff, and I thought about it. The only bad part is, the engines are, every one of them's a little bit different in width. So
right.
you got one that's got, too wide for the fuel lines. You do like a T to like some 48s or something. Then you got problems with, oh, hey, my fuel lines leak and it caught my car on fire. So we don't want to get into that.
Sure,
it's kind of more of a specialty thing. But
well, that's why you put the sticker on there for off-road use only.
Right. But doing the oil coolers, we're gonna kind of try to morph that into doing some for the buses. We have a larger cooler because some of these guys see the small cooler and they think it's oh, that's not big enough to cool my car. It's like, well, first off, your car's not oil cooled, it's an air cooled car.
Air cooled, yeah.
Oil cooled, yeah, it helps the temperature a little bit, but ultimately you need to have all the right stuff on there to make it cool correctly. You hear stuff with guys taking a lot of the factory tin off, and then the bottom side of the cylinder is getting hot and the top side's getting cool, and all kinds of weird stuff. When you start really talking to the engine guys and see what's what. And but anyway, these little coolers, we recommend them for guys that are making 200 horsepower less. And I've had a couple guys like, no, it'll be fine. I said, hey, this is what I recommend it for. And I've had a couple guys that are making 220 that in the 250 range that still want the cooler, and they've run it and they said they've had good luck with it. So I'm not going to give you the BS of, oh, we sent it to the laboratory and did testing, and all that. It's, hey, we're using it off of our experience and what we've done in the past and worked with different customers, and feedback from the real deal is always better than
absolutely
stimulated results. You know what I mean? But
so you're doing you got the tranny mounts, you've got the you're doing the tranny mounts, you're doing the oil coolers. What else you got? Then you're doing all the AN fittings and all that kind of stuff. And so the fact that Volkswagens, if a guy calls you up and says, look, I've got a set of 48s I'm running, this is the fuel pump I'm running, this is this I'm running, right. What fittings do I need? Outfit me with the fittings and give me the hose that's going to look the best and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. There's a million options when you get down to it. We sell stainless hardline. We sell, there's probably 5 or 6 different types of hose depending on the look they want or quality or what they're doing.
I know. I bought
how it is.
I bought the green hose. I was like, yeah, I need
the HS79,
and it was like $300. Yeah, I was like, I think it's green with a yellow line around it, and I was getting and I'm like, give me some of that, no problem. She's like, yeah, it's $300. I'm like, is that the right hose? Yeah, it was already cut. So what is in that hose? Is it laced with gold? What's in there? But yeah, there's super high pressure lines, and they're real space
it's like a Teflon-based
technology.
Hose, and it's and they actually have that hose along with another one they just come out with themselves to try and compete in the NASCAR stuff. Because I think that's one of their bigger markets is the NASCAR world, in drag racing and on down the list. But the HS79, people were shying away because there was some problems with it under, I guess vacuum side of things on, like, if you're running like my brain's not working right now. If you got like an oil system with like dry sump systems and stuff like that, the suction side of things, there have, people, you've got this big race team, you want everything to be right on, you don't want no problems burning money going to the track, sure. And then having a failure because of something, minute, that you could have changed for a couple dollars, right? But so they've come out with this new hose called Pro Plus that is a Teflon-based hose, and I haven't got into carrying all of that stuff yet, but they have reusable ends, they have crimp-on ends, and a lot more variety, but they still carry the other hose too, depending on what you're doing and what look you want, and, what application it really comes down to. So there's a lot of options with them, which is cool. They're close by for us, so, if you want something specialty that's weird that like I don't have, which I try to stock as many oddball adapters because I don't like to have to tell someone I don't have something, but we have a lot of stuff. So if I don't have it, I can say, hey, if I order it by noon, I have it the next day by 10 in the morning. So it works out pretty good. But that's the hose side, and I sell some other like miscellaneous things. I sell the Citrab coolers, not just the ones for the Volkswagen, but like bigger size models with fans or without fans, depending, if you got, needs a tranny cooler for a car, or a guy's got something, hey, you're making 300 horsepower and you want the next size up cooler, okay, we got that. We don't sell, we have a universal mount for those applications, but not something custom yet. But,
yeah,
it just between trying to run everything and make, get through your, we got cars we're building and doing that stuff, then trying to run the store. We tried working with somebody to do that for a while, and it was too hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
So we've actually just recently, we kind of shrunk down. We had an additional little area where the store was at, and we kind of moved everything up to where I'm spend most of my time. So right now I've got a bunch of drywall just got finished. Got to do some tile in the other office, and so I have my office and the store is connected now. But we still just trying to working on that and finishing everything up and do some more painting and the finished stuff. And I like everything to be dialed in nice, and put up some slat wall in here and get it all set up so when someone comes in they can look at the stuff we have and kind of
nice.
Get a good feeling for what we can supply them with. So
well that's good stuff, man. Well, we've been at it for a little while, but it's been great getting to chat with you on that oval and some of these cars. When are we going to be seeing some things hitting the shows that you're coming out with that oval? And that gray car, the guy with the gray Zwitter needs to bring it out. Whoever he sold it to needs to bring that car out.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even a Volkswagen guy. I think I heard he was maybe a hot rod guy or something else. I don't know. So I haven't heard too much of that. Randy Carlson actually, I think, had something to do with that sale, so he might know more about it. But other than that, I'm not sure if we're going to bring the car out in bare metal yet or what we're going to do. We're probably going to try to shoot some pictures of it in the raw. So as we progress here and see how things come together, I'd say over the next year we'll probably be closer to that stage, and at least give some more hints of what's going on, and get to show some people what's up. So
absolutely, man, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and kind of chat it up here on Let's Talk Dubs. Anybody wants to come check out your shop, they're free to cruise by your shop anytime during your normal business hours down there in Corona.
Except lunchtime.
Don't show up at lunchtime. Yeah, unless you got a big box of tacos, right?
That's right.
But go down and check out Aaron's shop, Foothill Fabrication. He's down in Corona, California. Check out his Instagram, which is Foothill Fabrication or Foothill Fab, and then you're on Facebook as well, right? So
right.
And
we have a F2 Performance Supply page too, which we're just kind of getting going with that. It's kind of it's there, but it's stagnant at the moment. We'll start posting some pictures of our product and different stuff we have going there soon.
Well, cool. Well, anybody in the Southern California area, or you don't even, if you're down there just to visit, swing in and check them out. Check out what they're doing. They're working on lots of cool stuff. Man, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And when you got some stuff coming out, man, feel free to shout at me. We'll get you on the podcast, even if it's just for a few minutes. Just talk about what you got coming up, and keep everybody plugged into what's happening over there at Foothill Fab.
Right on. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on, and good talking to you.
Yeah, definitely. It was a good time.
All right, brother.